Are your relationships a mess and you're just always wondering how in the world can I clean these things up? Well, we're going to talk all about that today. How do you deal with baggage? How do you deal with past relationship issues? And how do we handle them in a biblical way? Also today, we're going to talk about in our Bad Doctrine of the Week, should the government publicly fund Christian schools? Intriguing concept. I don't know. We'll talk about that and more all today on the Digging Deeper podcast. Well, hello and welcome to the Digging Deeper podcast. This is episode 12.
I believe so. Right?
Episode 12. We've been doing this a whole 3 months, guys. Anyways, we are glad that y'all have joined us here today. On this podcast, we dig into this last Sunday's sermon, so that way we might find ways to dig a little bit deeper into our hearts. We are glad that y'all joined us here today. My name is Chris Brown, and I'm the associate pastor here at First Baptist Azle.
My name is Jacob Belding. I'm the connections minister at First Baptist Azle.
And over sound production,
me, Judah.
Everyone. Now, we weren't here this past week. Pastor Lee, Roxanne, Wendy took over. Judah was the only one that was the constant through it all. But we are back, and we are ready to go. And so I know that you've been missing us, and I know that it just ruined your week that we weren't here. Probably not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well, we're glad y'all joined us. Before I forget, if you haven't yet, like, subscribe, comment, do all those things, and we'll have a great time. And that'll tell the algorithm that you enjoy seeing this content, and you'll see more of it. But anyways, without further ado, we're going to get into this past week's sermon Pastor Lee preached, and the title of the sermon was How to Reset Your Relationships. Have y'all ever had a bad relationship?
No.
Never?
Not one time.
Not one time?
No, my relationships are always perfect, 100%.
Perfect.
No problems.
Okay. Judah, have you ever had a bad relationship? No, this doesn't have to be romantic relationships. Right. It could be a relationship with a job, relationship with a friend, a family, a town, a class in school.
Okay, well, I have to retract my answer.
Okay, all right. I think we've all had some kind of bad relationship at some point, right? And the general consensus is, what do? Let's just go start over. That's just the easier thing to do, is start over. And what Pastor Lee wanted to get into is, like, what if there's a way that we could reset our relationships without having to replace our relationships? Right. And so there's some relationships in our lives, like if we have a relationship with a professor in a class, that's a little bit easier to, move on and switch. And, even if you have a bad relationship with an employer, potentially that there's a easy way to shift and move out of that. Mm-hmm. But if you have a struggling relationship with family or with a spouse or with close friends, those aren't things that we want to throw away, right?
Right.
Hopefully not.
It makes it's a whole lot harder to replace them.
Yes.
Right? Your professor, it could be a one-off class, and then you suffer through it, and then you get done, and then you move on to the next one, and it's all good.
It's all good. But then there's some relationships, let's take marriage, for example, that we're called to be in covenant with them.
Right.
We're not called to replace them at all. And so the question is like, if some of our relationships have moved into a dysfunctional area, what are some ways that we can kind of reset those relationships, get them focused on God, back on the right track, without having to just completely abandon it and start fresh? Right? Okay. Yep. So that's kind of the whole premise of the sermon that we're going to talk about today. And one of the main things that Pastor Lee gets into is, how do we let go of the past? Because, we're always bringing in baggage from past. And, unless, did you date anyone before you married Sam?
Yes, I did.
You did? Okay. All right. Because y'all started dating, in high school.
Yeah.
And so if you've had, significant relationships before meeting your spouse, you maybe even had marriages before meeting your spouse, likely you're bringing in baggage from those previous relationships. And it's not even in marriage, even in employers, if you had a rough job experience over here, then when you go into this job over here, you're kind of bringing in they treated me this way, and so never again, or whatever it may be. And so there's baggage, generally speaking, that we pull from from previous relationships. And one of the main premises of the sermon is, how do we let go of those things? How do we not allow previous dysfunctionality affect current relationships? And Pastor Lee gets into 3 things that we can do with baggage. And we can either deny it, we can transfer it, or we can release it. Mm-hmm. Those are the only 3 things you can do with it. So we're going to dig into all of that. But first, let's read the passage.
Yes, let's. This is Colossians 3, verses 7 through 11. In these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its Creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave free, but Christ is all and in all.
Yeah. So one thing I want to point out on that last verse right there, on the here, there's no Greek or Jew, circumcised, uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave free, but Christ is all, and Christ is in all and is all. One thing I want to point out is that Christianity was all about diversity before diversity was cool.
Yep, that's right.
Diversity is the cool thing to do now, right?
Yep.
But Christianity was paving that way before it even happened. We talked about last week in my sermon about how one of the redemption aspects of what Christ did on the cross is bringing all tribes and all nations and all tongues together. One of the things I don't even think I mentioned is in Revelation 22, when it's depicting the new heaven and the new earth, and it's talking about the tree of life that's coming up, that says that the leaves of the tree are for healing for the nations. Mm-hmm. And so what we're seeing in part now, in terms of like this healing aspect between races and nations and ethnicities, is going to be brought to full light in the new heaven and new earth.
Yep.
But diversity is the cool thing, and Pastor Lee kind of digs a bit into this aspect of we're all one under Christ. Why do you think? Here's a question for you. Why do you think that that's important in our relationships?
To be one under Christ.
Yes.
Because if we're one under Christ, that means by implication that we're all following. We're all following Christ individually as we're in relationship with each other. And if each of us is a Christian and a believer and really walking in His commands, and if we are working to put off the old self, put on the new self, then we all bring this necessary Christian unity to the table in our relationships. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, for Christianity, I mean, diversity was an element here before diversity was cool, mm-hmm. right? Nowadays, it seems like diversity for the sake of diversity, for the sake of being unique. Pastor Lee even talked about some of those things, being different and special than other people.
Which by the way, let me just interrupt you for a second. So he mentioned the unique and special things, and he talked about how each one has their own identity and fashion. Do you remember emo?
I was going to bring up emos.
Were you?
Yes.
I wrote that down. Judah, were you conscious whenever emo was a thing?
No, not really.
No? Do you know what it is?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. I love the emos.
Yeah.
And the goth kids. Yeah. Oh, hilarious.
Yeah.
Speaking of fun subcultures and subgroups. Oh my gosh, the emos and the goths, man.
Were you an emo guy?
No, 100% not. No, I avoided Hot Topic like the plague.
Yeah, so I wasn't emo. So there's like full emo.
Yeah,
which is like there was all those like punk rock bands that everyone's depressed. It's a very nihilistic viewpoint, and like their clothes represent that everything's in black and whatnot. So I was not full emo by any means, but I was closer to emo than I was, anything else. Right. When I first got into high school, I was like your typical church kid, like cargo shorts, like church t-shirt. Yes. And then by the time I got out of high school, I was starting to get a little bit closer to the emo side of things. Goth is just like full emo, like off the rails.
Well, and then goth really is the more, according to pop culture, right? goth is more of the nihilism side, where you know everything is awful, everything's wrong with the world. But then the emo side is more like, I hate myself. And
Depressed.
I'm depressed. Yeah.
Yeah. There's many pop songs or like pop culture songs from that time that just so perfectly sum up the emo culture.
Yes.
Ones that we won't get into now. I was probably a little bit closer on like the Metro side of things. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It was like, I feel like Metro was like a more like, it was like emo fashion, but like not all of the dark stuff
Right.
with it.
Right.
Yeah.
You didn't have to deal with the darkness within,
Yeah, right.
for example.
It's like, we like your clothes, but we're not depressed.
Right. We're actually happy to be wearing these kinds of clothes. And
Is there, Judah, you're a resident Gen Zer in the room. Is there a type of fashion or like subculture similar to emo, or not like emo, but like, what would that be called today in Gen Z world? Is there a name for it?
I'm not really aware of those kind of things, but I have seen a couple of high schoolers wear what you're describing.
Oh yeah, so it's
maybe
still,
it already exists.
it's still living on.
Yeah.
oh, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Just it's a little less intense now. I think it's kind of shifted over into other subcultures.
Well, so it's weird, and this will pull us a little bit back into this
Yeah.
identity conversation. So I feel like our generation, the millennial generation, kind of started to initiate this, and then Gen Z, like we were very anti-label. Right? Like we didn't want labels at all. And now it's shifted to where we don't want to be labeled as a group and identify with a group, but we want an individual label for us now. So if we were to move, and I think Pastor Lee mentioned this, if we were to move into like the LGBTQ community, it's very little like group labels, but it's a lot of like individualistic labels.
Right. Well, just look at all of the different, genders and pronouns that exist. There are hundreds of made-up genders and hundreds of made-up pronouns. It's like, why? And it's for that reason, I would suggest.
And so, it's interesting for that community, because there's like one overarching identity, but within that large identity, there's so many like individualistic identities. And this is really important for us talking about, and we can get back into what you're saying, in this concept of Christianity, how we are very diverse, yet we are all one and identify under Christ. That is the only reason that our relationships can work.
Right.
Because whatever we identify personally comes second to our identity in Christ.
Right. And that's that was exactly the point. That's where I was going is, hey, even though we are diverse, because we are different people, we are and get to enjoy unity as the body of Christ together, which is the big difference, I think, between the culture today and the church.
Yeah, and I was talking to someone last week when I preached mainly on this subject. We were talking about afterwards. Whenever you try to unify a group with a hodgepodge of identities, it actually doesn't work because we're not on the same playing field anymore. It's like whatever you identify as also comes with its own set of values and purpose and beliefs and whatever I identify. And we can like tolerate each other in that, but we can't unify.
Right.
Because there's nothing to unify under.
That's right.
Right. And so that's the beauty of Christianity, is that you have your upbringing, Judah has his upbringing, I have my upbringing. We're all very different people. We all enjoy very different things. But when we come together, our core belief, values, and purpose isn't based on those things. It's based on Christ.
Right.
And that's why we can come together and unify, because all those things are secondary.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of like, just like what you said, right? Our primary identity has to be that we're Christians, that we are in Christ. And that should always be our driving identity, and everything else is second. But it can be kind of tough, right? Especially, first off, as Texans, even, I mean, as far as identity goes, we even have all of our own, origin, history, and even
our own
myth
state pledge.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's right. And to be honest, we are cooler than literally the rest of anybody.
Did you know, I did not realize that other states don't have a pledge.
I did know that. Yeah.
So I grew up, I grew up in Texas, and so every day when we went to school, we'd say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'd say the Texas Pledge, and that was just what we did. And Randy came over here, and she worked in the school, and she first came over here, and she came home, and she's like, "Y'all have a pledge?" And I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "Y'all don't?" She's like, "No." I was like, "Well, I guess y'all aren't proud to be Missourian."
Right. I don't know who would be when you could be Texan. You know, so there it is again.
Is it? Okay, you're a history guy. You would know. I want to say I heard that Texas is the only state that you can fly the flag the same level as or that's okay to fly the flag the same level as the America flag.
So I don't know what the sort of legalities are on that, but because the Republic of Texas was its own recognized country for a better part of 10 years, historically, then yes, the Texas flag can fly at the same height as the American flag.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, on the legal side, that's the argument. I don't know how that
are there
out.
Even legalities surrounding that? I don't know.
Oh, there are.
Oh, there are?
There's
Really?
flag codes and everything.
Oh, wow.
And now they get like stomped on all the time and run over. Part of it's, free speech issues and things. But it's kind of like, you're only supposed to fly the American flag this particular way. And, and even the Texas flag, and you're not supposed to use it for... And there's like a list of things. I have read some of the flag codes because I was interested. And so it's like, well, when you have your Texas, swim trunks, I think that technically goes against the flag code, for example, or Texas flip-flops. They have them at Walmart for $5. You can pick them up, or napkins or whatever. So, anyway, I digress, but there you go.
So the important part is Texas is of the same statute and level as America.
Oh, yeah. And did you? Oh, here we go. You're going to get me going. We have our own power grid in Texas.
So we could officially sustain ourselves.
Yes.
And we have oil, right?
Yes, we have oil. Texas would be, last I looked, I think a top 12 economy in the world, all by ourselves.
Oh, really?
Yep. And that's in the world. I think we would be right behind Canada, which I have feelings about. But
we need to step it up.
Yeah, well, that's right. We need to up our GDP and keep going.
To be fair, Canada's like 5 times the size.
Right. And then Texas, we also, I think this is more recent, we have started to, like how there's Fort Knox, which is where all the gold for the United States Treasury is held. Texas, we are building or have recently built our own facility to store Texas' own gold.
Sounds like Texas is getting ready to do something.
That's right. Like we're going to secede or something. Right. The rest of the country would be so sad to see us go.
So I know this is not, every time the word secede comes up, I know this is not what would actually happen, but in my mind, the only thing that I can think about is if Texas was to secede, we would literally break off of America and like drift out into the ocean.
Right. Well, and then, obviously before we seceded, we would need to get our land back from Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado.
That's
Texas used to go up into Wyoming.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we need to fix that, man.
Oh, yeah. So the whole deal was, the Texas, right after the war with Mexico, winning the war with Mexico, had tons and tons of debt. And so part of the deal of Texas becoming a state in the United States was that the U.S. was going to take on all of Texas' debt. And in exchange, here's some land. Now, if the United States turns around and gives us all of our part of the debt, right, of the U.S. national debt, then it stands to reason we get all of our cool stuff back. Like we could go skiing in Texas.
Yeah.
Why not?
Would Oklahoma want to be part of Texas? Surely.
Oh, I'm sure they would want to.
Yeah.
But there's that little sliver, the Panhandle. Like that was part of Texas.
Interesting.
Before. So just that part. We don't want the rest of Oklahoma. They can keep it.
Yeah. That's the real question.
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
Right.
Can we just like take back like a little sliver to like have a road that goes through it?
Yeah.
To get to Colorado?
Yeah. Why not?
Because I'm fine with Colorado.
Yeah, that's cool.
But Oklahoma.
That's whatever.
Someone's calling me. things.
Yeah, but it's the same. Whether we're Texans or slightly less cool as being an American. Texas is the best. We know that. But it's kind of shifting over to be a little bit more serious, right? Our identity really needs to be in Christ first, not in things like political parties, right?
Yes.
I'm a Republican, or hey, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Libertarian, or whatever. It's like, that's all fine and good, but if that's your primary identity, that's a problem.
Right, because again, like whatever your primary identity is, those are going to be the core beliefs, principles, and values of your life. And you can only unify, like truly unify, with other people who have the same core beliefs, principles, and values. And you can be Republican if you want, be Democrat, I guess, if you want.
If you want to risk it.
Yeah. But you just have to make sure that, like I'm a... So if I'm a Republican, I'm a Christian Republican,
right,
not a Republican Christian.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's just got to be, the order's got to be right in terms of what's at the core of it. All that's really important because that's going to set the foundation for all of this.
Right.
If you aren't coming from that perspective, now resetting your relationships is going to be really hard.
That's right.
Right. And that was the thing I tell people when they're dating is like, the first and foremost thing is like, are you both Christian and like truly Christian?
Right.
Like, do you truly hold the values and beliefs and the purpose of Christianity? Because in everything else past that, you can work through, right? If you both truly hold that, everything else you can work through because you're both playing by the same rule book now. And so it's like if me and Randy get into a disagreement on finances or raising our kids or, we're going to do this or this or this or this, as long as we can both come back to here's our core beliefs and where we can unify, we can work out the details of that. But if we can't even agree on that, then now when it comes to like a question of like how do we raise our kids, we're both coming at from two different value sets.
That's right.
It's like how, at that point you just compromise and like one person just gets their way and the other one doesn't, or how you spend your money. It's like, if our core belief is in God and following God, now the question isn't, what can we do with our money? It's like, what should we do with our money?
Right.
And we can, again, still disagree on that, but it's always going to come back to we're stewards of our finances under God. Now, where do we go from here? Okay.
Agreed.
Any other thoughts about that before we get into the specifics?
Yeah, pop quiz.
Sure.
I'll open it up to Judah as well. What day is Texas Independence Day?
July 3rd.
Not a bad guess. But this,
wait.
Yeah.
Is it Juneteenth?
No.
That was
much later.
That was when slavery was declared, or the Emancipation Proclamation made its way to Texas. That's Juneteenth.
Yeah. March 2nd, 1836. March 2nd.
Okay.
Is Texas Independence Day.
So are you saying that's when we should secede?
That's when I'm... No, I'm saying I think it's a problem that we don't know this.
Oh,
like, it's proud
gotcha.
Texans,
Okay.
So maybe for the church we should have an event. Texas Independence Day celebration. We'll shoot off fireworks and give the 4th of July a run for its money.
Yeah, so instead of follow the flag, it's like follow Texas.
That's right.
Okay. All right.
Follow the Lone Star flag.
Well, fun fact.
There you go.
Hey, if you knew what the Texas Independence Day was, then comment down below and just you and Jacob can start a
we
support
start
group.
Club.
Yeah. You thought you were coming here for
Bible.
For Bible. You're actually here for Texas history.
Oh,
if you didn't know, Jacob used to be a history teacher.
I did. Yeah.
So he knows all the stuff. So
I don't know about that. I know some things.
Some things. Okay, so all that's the groundwork for like building our relationships on that foundation, that foundation of our identities in Christ. We can be different, but our identities in Christ.
Yep.
Amen.
Okay,
so now to get a little bit more specific, so let's say that your relationship has moved into a dysfunctional, toxic state, right? So how do we now, under this under this umbrella of Christianity, how do we now reset our relationships without ruining our relationships? And one of this could probably be a whole sermon series in itself, but one of the primary things that Pastor Lee got into is baggage.
Yes.
Baggage always happens. What's some examples of baggage?
First off, we bring a lot of baggage just with the way that we're raised, all of us, whether it's a good upbringing or whether it's not so good of an upbringing. All of our parents, our nuclear families that we grew up in are all different. And so even if our parents did a really, really good job, we're bringing baggage along, for example. So, let's say that you come from a family that, there was, your parents like never fought in front of you. And, things, things were generally pretty good, right? Well, your level, right, when it comes to arguing and things is going to be relatively lower versus somebody who comes from a family where parents are at each other's throats all the time, shouting, yelling, and those sorts of things. So there's going to be a difference of base level, right, like 1 to 10 of like how it is that you go about communicating in an argument with each other, right, which leads to, just as an example, like different perceived levels of intensity and those sorts of things. So even just our upbringings, right? Whether we're conscious of it or not, we bring lots of baggage. Yeah,
and this is one of the things I think we did in our premarital counseling, where they kind of ask questions of like, okay, here's like a bunch of like, random things that go on in a normal like household.
Right.
Whose job is it to do what? And that was kind of the question. So like taking out the trash. Whose job? Husband, wife. Doing dishes. Whose job? Husband, wife.
Kids.
Taking right. Before kids. Taking care of kids, changing diapers, doing laundry, paying bills, a whole list of things. Yeah. And it like, let's say you grew up in a household where the husband always took out the trash. Well, now, what do you think that kind of baked in perception, like unspoken expectations, if you for 20 years of your life watched your dad take out the trash, then now your perception is
that's my job.
The husband takes out the trash, right? If you watched your mom cooked dinner every night, not even just like she was the one that was cooking, but it's just like she literally cooked dinner 5 nights a week. He never went out. Well, now again, that's baked into the unspoken expectations of this is how it's going to work, and like those aren't bad things, right? But it's just it's things that we're pulling in from our past, and sometimes baggage is a good thing. Right. I need my clothes when I go traveling. Right. Exactly. Usually we don't refer to it as a good thing. But it's just bringing in things from our previous past, and it takes a lot. Like you're married. Yep. It's figuring out we've got 2 people from two different upbringings. And now we're coming together to make one new thing, and now we have to figure out like, okay, like what are like your preconceived notions on how this should work? What are yours? Okay, now how do we come together and make something new out of this? And the goal isn't to make it look exactly like your home, for better or worse. Right. The goal is to come together and make something new. But yeah, I think that's a great example. So other examples of baggage that are more common that we think of is like, let's say you were in an abusive relationship.
Yep.
Previously. Baggage. Yep. Yeah. Now that's going to skew your view. Like, let's say you're a woman who was verbally abused in a previous relationship. That's going to skew how you view men in your next relationship. Yep. Let's say you were a man and your wife or significant other, cheated on you in your past relationship. Well, now that's going to skew how you view your next one, unless you deal with it. Right. Any other examples that you can think of?
No, I think those make the point.
Yeah,
pretty well.
And it's one of those things that we all know what it is. Like, just think about think about previous relationships and how you were hurt, and likely there's baggage from that that you have to deal with. And so let's get into the three things that we can do with that baggage that Pastor Lee got into. So you have baggage from your past relationships. Here's the three things you can do with it. You can either deny it, you can transfer it, or release it. Let's start from the top. Deny it. Okay. Any thoughts?
This one is, I think, very, very tempting to do. I think, denying and not recognizing that we do bring baggage is a pretty, it can be a significant issue. Mm-hmm. It's like the more that we ignore. So here you go, illustration time. Mm-hmm. So you have this is totally hypothetical. Mm-hmm. Saying. So let's say
this is not my relationship.
Right. No, I'm going to go with more concrete.
Before we talk about anything marriage, you might want to make this disclaimer too. Randy, I love you. And nothing that I'm saying here has anything to do with you. And I would not have it any other way. That's my disclaimer as we move forward.
My disclaimer is absolutely, Sam, I am talking about you and our relationship. No.
That being said, hypothetically, the worst.
Right, hypothetically. So back in December, it was a Friday, and that's one of the days that we have off here. So I'm sitting on the couch. I'm on the phone talking with my dad, and all of a sudden I hear something, and it sounds kind of like the washing machine turned on out in the closed-in garage area, and I'm like, that's weird. There's nobody else that's home but me. How could the washer have started on its own? I'm like, I better go check that out real quick. So I open the door. No, washer's not going, but the water sound is getting louder. So I go outside into Paul's room, and I look, and there was a pipe that had burst in the ceiling, and it's just a waterfall. And so one of my responses could have been, it's fine. Like, let's just deny it. Right. Mm-hmm. And what could go wrong? Right. I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm just going to keep on living my life. It's my day off. I'm going to go back, sit on the couch, finish my phone conversation. Mm-hmm. I will deal with this later. Right. It's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Obvious problem, though,
right.
Is the more water that pours into that room, the more that it fills up, the more it's going to seep over into all of the other rooms in the house. And then what was already a significant problem becomes a much bigger and blown up problem. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's there you go. Yeah. That's my deny it illustration.
Yes. So obviously in that situation, you would be ridiculous to deny it.
Oh my gosh. I'm like, how do we turn the water off? I don't know where it is. And running around. I actually called Pastor Lee, and he was here working on his sermon, I think, or something. And I said, hey, where's the water shut off? I have no idea where it is. And he's lived through that before, too. Mm-hmm. So he goes, I'll be right there. So I'm waiting outside, and he comes sprinting from the back of the church. I didn't even know he could move that fast.
Yeah,
here he comes. And he went on and turned it off. And so now I know where the water shut off is, which is nice. But
if that happens again, hopefully it won't happen again. So we can deny it.
Yep.
Here's usually what happens when I see this happen, is you have someone who goes through relationship after relationship, maybe even church after church, job after job, marriage after marriage, and they tend, everywhere they go, tend to have, there's something wrong. Mm-hmm. There's something wrong. And I think one of the things Pastor Lee mentioned is that, if you've gone through, let's say, 4 marriages, and at the end of every marriage, it's the other person. Like this is what was wrong with number 1. This is what was wrong with number 2. This is what was wrong with number 3. This is what was wrong with number 4. At some point, you have to ask yourself, did you have nothing to do with this at all?
Yep.
Like, are you in denial about your own issues that you're bringing to the table?
Right. And it's funny, he mentioned a former church member that went through 9 marriages. Mm-hmm. Growing up, when I was a teenager, we'd go to breakfast each Saturday morning with my dad, my uncle, my brother would come, and some other guys, and just have a good time, just solving the world's problems, basically, over breakfast. And there was a guy that'd come with us. He's a great guy. He's a lot of fun to be around, but he was on his 5th marriage, depending on how you count, because he married one of them twice. But he said,
nice.
after about the 3rd one, after about the third divorce, he goes, you start to realize it's not just them. So he, for him, it took a little while to figure it out, and luckily the last one stuck, and they've been married for a long time now. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it takes some of those things happening to really make us aware that, hey, like...
Yeah. Well, I've heard it put this way. So, like, imagine your life is like you're driving a car, and you look in the rearview mirror, and behind you there's just like a 40-car pile up behind you, just wreck after wreck after wreck after wreck. Now, you can do one of two things. You can say, man, everyone else is such a bad driver.
Right.
Or you can pose the question of, like, am I driving in a way that's just causing pileups behind me?
Yeah.
And that's the thing to ask. Like, if every endeavor that you go through in your life, if you were just constantly met with, everyone's a jerk, no one gets me, like, whatever it is, at some point you have to ask yourself, like, am I the common denominator here? And I've had to ask myself that too. Yeah. like you have to, like, come to the realization of, like, am I bringing some unhealthy stuff to the table? And it's not negating other people's responsibility, of course. Like, they may have had their wrongs in it. If you've gone through 5 churches, the previous 4 churches may be messed up some, but the question isn't, are they completely in the right? Are you completely in the right? The question is, like, what am I bringing to the table that's causing these pileups to happen behind me? And so we can just deny it. Yeah. And of course we don't want to do that. We always want to take responsibility. Even so, like in marriage counseling, it's always a thing. Like, let's say spouse cheats on you. They're in the wrong, right?
Yes. Yeah, they're responsible.
They are responsible for that decision that they made. Let's say they're 99% wrong. Well, let's say you may have a 1%. Okay, no, that's fine. We're not negating the 99% error that happened over here, but let's just ask ourselves, okay, what 1% do you have? And let's own 100% of your 1%.
Yes,
right? And because, like, marriage isn't about, like, you did wrong and now you need to clean it up. Marriage is about you did wrong, now let's both help clean it up together.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I could go on that for a while.
Absolutely.
Yes. So don't deny the baggage that you have, because once you deny it, now you just kind of live in a fantasy world, and it's everyone else is at wrong. Right. You're never at wrong.
Right. And then we can't enjoy any sort of renewal of any relationship we currently have or any that we'll have in the future.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Yep. So don't want to deny it. The second thing that we can do with it is we can transfer it.
Yes.
Which is, like, if you're denying it, what you're really doing is you're transferring it.
Yes.
So you can transfer. What's an example, or what does that look like?
She made me do it. It's going to be the most obvious. Right?
So that actually happens a lot. Like, if you're talking to someone who had an affair on their spouse, there's usually, every now and then there might be someone that, like, say, like, yeah, you're right, I messed up. Usually what happens is there's a whole host of reasons as to what their spouse did, and those things that their spouse did is what led them to having that affair. Right. And so it's kind of like shrugging off responsibility and transferring the blame to the other person.
Right. Transferring it.
Yeah.
And even what that looks like, I think, kind of shines out from the passage a little bit. So the structure, right, of it. So Colossians 3, this is 8 through 9. But now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices. So whenever... if we're going to enjoy a renewal of relationships, if we are really striving to put off the old self, right, whenever we go about transferring our baggage onto somebody else, right, I thought it really kind of the structure of the passage kind of moves inward to outward, right? So it starts with anger, then it moves to wrath, then malice, and then from there, it's more overt, right, through the mouth, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth, and lies and things like that. which the Bible says a lot about. The things that come out of our mouth really reflect the state and condition of our hearts, right?
Yeah.
How it is that we react says a lot about who we are in us.
Out of the mouth, the heart speaks.
Yeah, that's right. It's in Matthew 12, right? Verse 35, the good person out of his good treasure brings forth good. The evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, by your words you will be condemned. Right? And there's a lot more there as well, but a bad tree can't produce good fruit. You wouldn't expect for a good tree, on the other hand, to produce bad fruit, right? And it's the same way, right? With any anger and resentment and things that we're directing towards another person, right? When that fully sort of blooms, right, then it really appears as very, very concretely as slander and lies, and it comes out of our mouth.
Yeah, and what can happen with that, your undealt with baggage in the past is you end up just projecting that baggage onto the other person. And so, like, so it's like if we were talking about the lies thing. I would say lies in the sense of like you're projecting an untruth onto another person. Right. You're not necessarily like going around like gossiping about them in this scenario. But let's say you had someone who, cheated on you, or let's move off marriage. Let's move into a workplace thing. Let's say you had a previous workplace where there was a lot of gossip going around. Your name was just dragged through the mud and all that. And you have that baggage from that, and now you're in your new workplace, and you just haven't dealt with that in the past, and so now it's easy to project everything that happened at that last one into this new one. So let's say you see two coworkers over there, and they just happen to look at you while they're talking, and you have all this undealt with baggage of like how people ran your name through the mud, and so now you're projecting all that onto that conversation, saying, "Oh, they're talking about me right now." You don't even know that they're talking about you, but you're projecting that onto them. And that's like a form of like lying in the sense of like you're projecting an untruth, or at least at the very least an unverified truth onto them. And that's one thing, that's one way that we transfer it, right? Like we're taking all of these like bitterness and anger from past relationships and just projecting it and transferring it onto someone who may not even be doing that to you. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And we don't want to do that.
We don't want to do that because that's
not good.
And then whenever that eventually blows up, now it's confusing to the person that you're talking to.
Right. Whoa. What are you talking about?
They're like, I had this happen to me. A girl that I was dating in college had some I guess she had some issues with friends or boyfriends cheating on her or whatever. And she came to me one time. She's like, "Hey, my friend said she saw you with your ex-girlfriend." I'm like, "I haven't talked to my ex-girlfriend in like since we broke up. I still haven't talked to her
because I don't want to."
Right? And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It was just confusing from my end. I'm like, I don't even know where you're coming from with this. Like, I can't even like disprove this because like I can't. I don't have video footage of me not talking to someone. And so it was just this transfer of baggage was taking place, and it just left me confused. And I'm like, I don't even know how to convince you that this didn't happen because like it didn't happen. Right. Anyways.
It's like, I don't know if you've seen these on the internet, but somebody will, their Amazon package was supposed to be delivered, and it wasn't. And so Amazon sends back an email, says, "Can you send us photographic proof, or can you send us any evidence that it wasn't there?" And they just take a picture of their porch with no Amazon box on it. And they're like, "Here you go." And they're like, "Sorry, sir, we'll send you a replacement."
Ask stupid questions, get stupid answers.
It's pretty clever. But
But that can ruin a relationship. Really quickly if you start transferring your previous baggage onto them. Now it puts the whole relationship in a defensive posture, and relationships can't thrive in defense.
Yep.
And so make sure you're not denying it. you accept that that's a reality, and in accepting that's a reality, now you're starting to recognize when you're projecting and transferring it onto another person,
Right.
and just dealing with it. And it all goes with, let's move into point 3, which gets us back into the passage that you were talking about. You can deny it, you can transfer it, or you can just release it.
Yeah.
Which much easier said than
Yes.
done. But you can just release it, just let it go. Be like Elsa from Frozen. Let it go.
Classic song at
Yeah.
this point, isn't it?
And this is where it gets pretty overtly into our passage.
Right.
Do you want to read that verse again?
Yes. Colossians 3. I'll just read 7 through 11 again.
Okay.
In these two you once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its Creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all.
Yeah. And so, where it says you must rid yourself of these things. And anger, malice, slander, rage. It's a lot easier said than done, because if you have anger and you have malice, and let's throw in some synonyms into that of like bitterness.
Yeah.
Lots of times those are built up baggage, and now you have to like find a way to rid yourself of these things. And there's times whenever me and Randy disagree, there's like this inner like frustration, and I'm not frustrated at Randy as much as I'm just frustrated at something, and I have to really process. I'm a processor. I'm a talk out loud kind of person, and I'll sit there and I'll just stew on something for 30 minutes, not just like not just getting more and more mad, but more just asking myself, I'm like, I'm unreasonably upset about this. Why am I upset about this?
Yeah.
This isn't a big deal. She loaded the dishwasher wrong. That's not a big deal. I'm not mad about the dishwasher. What am I upset about?
Right.
And just like, you almost have to do like a self-therapy session, where like you have to just dig down deep. And it's like whatever you're angry about, you're probably not angry about that thing. You're angry about something else that's just buried deep within you. And you have to just dig and dig and poke and prod and figure out, this doesn't feel good. Why doesn't this feel good? And don't settle for the surface level answer that you get. And that's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful, and it's a process. And there's some people that are really good about self-reflection and processing that out. And then with other people, you may need help.
Yeah.
You may need to talk to someone, and not necessarily even like a professional like counselor or therapist, but maybe just a friend. And like, not here's what tends to happen: we get upset about something, we have this anger, rage in us, and we go talk to our friend, not to actually deal with the anger or the rage, but just to vent.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I want to share with you everything that this person did, and I want you to affirm me in it. And the moment that they don't affirm you, then like, you don't get it.
Now you're more mad.
Yeah. Then you go on. But it's like having friends that you can like share, hey, they did this. I feel this. I don't want to feel this.
Yeah.
Help me process this.
Right.
Yeah, that's really how those conversations should go. And if you're a person, let's say you're a person who's gone through multiple marriages or whatever, and you just have a ton of baggage, like you have like 40 years of baggage that's not dealt with. I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to go see a counselor.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Time.
There's no shame in that.
There's no shame in that.
It's a way to, like you said, to process.
Yeah.
And really be able to release these kinds of things.
Obviously, find a good Christian counselor.
Right.
Because lots of counselors say stupid stuff out there.
Yes. Be picky with your counselor.
Yeah. But I don't think there's any shame in that. I think combined with that, you should also invest in community, in your biblical community, in your church. I would not use a counselor as a
they're not the end all be all.
They're not the end all be all. They're a tool.
Right.
They're a tool to help you process, because what counselors do, what therapists do, they go to school to learn tips and tools and trades on how to help people process and work through these things in a way that even you and I don't know how,
right.
Just because they deal with that every day. And so So those are good to help you work through these things, because again, some of this rage and anger that's buried in you may be buried so deep and behind so many layers that you have to really sit and poke and prod on it for a long time, and you may need someone who has professional training to help you poke and prod at those things until you get down to the root issue of it. But it's incredibly important for us to release those things. Now, the Bible sometimes speaks very like principled, and doesn't give us like all of like, the nitty gritty process of it, mainly because there is no cookie cutter process to it all. But it gives a very like blanket statement of, now you must rid yourself of these things, all anger and all malice, all rage. Wow, that's super. It's clear cut.
Thanks, Paul. We appreciate it.
Just get rid of it.
Okay.
There you go. And so it's a very simple statement on the surface, but the reality, the practical reality of it is, man, you have to lock arms with the church, lock arms with God and the Spirit, and work at it.
That's right.
The sanctification process to work at it.
You're right, and it doesn't. It's not like a one-off fix. Right, for these kinds of things. But another kind of in line with this about like how to go about actually releasing it. Pastor Lee mentioned 2 Corinthians 5:17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. And then he goes on. He keeps going. He says, all this is from God, who through Christ reconciled us to himself and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That is, in Christ, God was reconciling the world to himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and entrusting to us the message of reconciliation. Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. For our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And so, if we have been working to really release those things that are in our lives, and we find ourselves, consistently failing and falling short, a reminder of who we are in Christ is necessary. Like it's, I don't know about you, it's necessary, like basically on a daily basis to like remind myself of the gospel, who I was before, who God and who Christ is, what he came to do, how undeserving, what a serious problem with sin that we all have. Because I think, the more that we kind of go through our daily lives, it's easy to forget just the immensity of our own sin and the problem that we have. I mean, if it wasn't a problem, Paul wouldn't say, hey, put off the old self, right? And so reminding ourselves that we need to be rooted in Christ first, right? The gospel and the power that God has, used, right, to make us new creations, right? That's real, right? And so if we're just sort of working at it from sort of a self-reforming kind of a tactics, we're using those tactics or formulas or things like that without gospel power behind it, we're gonna fail. And we'll fail miserably, and we'll continue failing. Then we'll be frustrated when we continue failing until we really remember, who we are in Christ.
Well, and that's like a really important part that I'm glad you mentioned is that I mentioned it last week in my sermon is that like Christ has redeemed us.
Yes.
With God, right? But Christ has also redeemed us with each other. But the restoration of our relationship with each other is second in the process of our relationship being redeemed with God. And so if you're in a state where you're like, man, I'm trying to fix these relationships, but you haven't solid up your relationship with God, you're probably just it's like you were saying, like you have to allow Christ's work to happen in you personally first before it can transmit out to, as Jordan Peterson would say, clean your room before you try to clean up the world, right? And so allow that to happen. One of the things I say is don't just think about what you were saved from, but what you were saved for.
Right. And it's not just to interject. A lot of times we think about, okay, I was saved back at this point in time. when I was justified, and then in the future, we get to enjoy the new heaven and the new earth, right? We don't want to forget about the here and now, right? 'Cause it can be neglected if we're not careful, and it shouldn't be neglected. And so, I agree.
Yeah, one of the things I tell myself is, let's say I'm dealing with or processing something or dealing with, let's say, anger in this passage, is like if I'm focused solely on, I'm a sinner, then my mindset's going to be like, I'm sinning. I'm glad God's going to forgive me for this. But if my focus is on my new identity that God has given me, then now the thought is, I've been saved from this. God's forgiven me for this, but God's also leading me to something new.
Right.
And he's leading me to a life of not just where I need forgiveness from anger, but to a life where I can be free from anger.
Right.
And so, all those things are good foundation things to have in this process.
Right, for sure.
All right. I got some more things that I could say, but we should probably wrap it up here. Do you got any last little bits on the sermon?
I thought it was a great sermon, and it flowed nicely from the series on worship. I thought. I thought it was good.
Cool.
Overall.
Well, that's the sermon from this past Sunday. It was how to reset your relationships. And the idea being is that in Christ, we are all one. We come from different backgrounds and different upbringings and different ethnicities, yet we all have a new identity in Christ. And from that identity, we're all operating under the same values and purposes and beliefs. And so in that, we can reset our relationships without having to abandon them. And the main thing that he talked about is in this process is just letting go of the past, not allowing past relationships to affect your current relationships. And so the baggage that we get from past relationships, there's only three things we can do with them. We can deny it and pretend it's not there. We can transfer and project our thoughts onto other people, or we can do the biblical thing and to release it, to rid ourselves of all of our anger and bitterness and malice and rage, so that our current relationships aren't feeling the brunt of those things. And then ultimately, we do that by putting off our old self and allowing Christ and the new self to shine through it all. All right, that was the sermon. Now, let's move into our bad doctrine of the week. Jacob, what is our bad doctrine of the week?
All right. This is going to be a fun one.
Okay.
And I think this one will lead to lots and lots of discussion. So This is fun. Okay, so this is from back in June. This is a headline from the New York Times. Oklahoma approves first religious charter school in the United States. So part of the article is the school will offer online Roman Catholic instruction funded by taxpayers. Its approval is certain to tee off a legal battle over the separation of church and state. So Oklahoma, they approve what is the first religious charter school in the United States. And so
let's just, for those that don't know, let's define what's a charter school versus a private school.
Okay. So a charter school is funded by public dollars, by tax dollars. However, charter schools, it's not just open enrollment where, hey, if you live in the area of that particular school in a particular school district, that you're like automatically going to be like a student there, or your kids would automatically be a student there.
So it's kind of like a publicly funded private school?
Sort of,
yeah.
But not at the same time. So it you do have to apply, and they can reject anybody's application that they want to. It's not like they're obligated to take X amount of students or those sorts of things. So you do have to apply. So yeah, is that kind of
yeah? Where a private school receive no public funding,
right.
It's all
private.
It's all private. You pay tuition or donors or things like that, but none of it comes from the government.
Right.
Where charters do get money from the government.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. Just so that way, no one's like, we got private school down the street. What are you talking about? Christian school.
Right. So the big difference is here. This is the first charter school being funded with public tax dollars to be established in the United States. Right, that's the big deal. So yeah, there's tons of religious private schools all over the country. Right, the difference with this one is it gets public funding.
Yeah,
and it was approved.
Cool.
So then the question is, I'd like your opinion on this one. So the question is, okay, how is it appropriate for tax dollars, let's say, let's kind of apply it to ourselves. Here in Texas, would it be appropriate for tax dollars to be used to establish a charter school that teaches Christianity?
Is it appropriate? So this gets into it would depend.
Yes.
It would depend on how they get the funding, what qualifies the funding, and all that. Without knowing all the details of it, I am intrigued by the idea of the voucher system. So like right now, we have property taxes, and those property taxes go towards the public schooling, and that's it. Like whether or not I choose to homeschool my kid or take my kid to a private school, my property taxes go over there. The idea, as far as I understand it, the voucher system is more or less so of whether or not you use it, your money goes over here. Voucher system is a little bit more of like, okay, here's the allotted amount of money that you've paid. Now you can take that money wherever you want it to go.
Right.
In terms of like education, right? Is that the understanding?
Okay. Yeah, that's the voucher system.
So I can either apply it to the public school, send my kids to public school. I can apply it to homeschool maybe. I don't know if they would allow that.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, let's take homeschool off the table. I could go to a charter school here, just like a secular charter school, and apply it there, or I could take it to the Christian school down the street and apply it there. If that's the case, I like that. I'm a fan of that. If it's the case of whether or not my kid goes there, my money gets sent there, that's where I'm a little bit more iffy. Not from a Christian perspective, but from a who's to say, like an Islam school doesn't get started, and now my public dollars are going to fund that. Now, if it's like the voucher system where only the public dollars that come from people who believe in that is being applied to that, in that case, that's fine, as long as it's not my dollars that's going there.
And it also depends on the voucher system. So, and just to be clear, there's not a voucher system right now.
Yeah, there's not.
In Texas, right? It gets brought up sometimes. So the part of the problem then with the voucher system would be, let's say that, per student, we're talking about, however many thousands of dollars for the year would be in the public school system allotted for that student. Therefore, the public school gets that many thousands of dollars. I think part of the problem with the voucher system is especially if you aren't paying as much as the allotment, the funding allotment for your student, right? And that's having to be subsidized by other people's tax dollars. And then you take that and then go and apply it to a private school. Then somebody else's dollars are going to fund that school.
Even with the voucher system, you could still be potentially paying to some degree by subsidizing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Potentially. I mean, it depends. On the other hand, if your property taxes are high enough, then
you're subsidizing everyone.
Right. Then you're subsidizing everybody else. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Generally speaking, that'd be my thought. In terms of like, I don't have a problem with it as much on like, separation of church and state. I think there's a lot of I hate using this word, misinformation on what that actually means.
Right.
And so that's not as much of my issue. I think if we were to be fair, the slippery slope method could be applied both ways.
Yeah.
In that it's really cool for us now because there's a Christian school that's getting public funding, but who's to say it's not some other religion that we disagree with that's not getting it.
Well, then even the charter school method is intriguing. I think it's intriguing that that first off they've gotten away with this so far.
It is surprising.
Yeah. But let's even we can bring it a little bit closer to home. So in Texas, there was a bill in the Texas state legislature to mandate that every classroom in public schools have post the Ten Commandments, a copy of the Ten Commandments. And it didn't end up passing, right? Our legislature for Texas, they only meet once every 2 years because there's a long history. Cliff Note version: we don't trust government. And so the less time that they have to make laws, the less that we get the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
So the bill didn't end up passing, right? But it was something that was on the table that they were considering in a public school. So my thoughts on it. When I taught government, I did have the 10 Commandments up on the wall. And part of the reason was because we talked about it. You can't not if you're going to talk about government.
It's part of history.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And, there's a very long history. The United States didn't just happen in a vacuum. Right. There's tons of history that contributed to the founding of our government. And the 10 Commandments is part of that. Now, it does kind of beg the question, though, is if the 10 Commandments were posted in every single classroom, how are those 10 Commandments going to be treated by those who are more secular or atheistic or agnostic or not believers? Are they going to be dragged through the dirt? Nobody knows exactly what teachers might say, right, about the 10 Commandments. So in that sense, it kind of makes me hesitate a little bit. If my kids were in public school, would I want somebody else teaching my kids about the 10 Commandments if what they're teaching them may be wrong?
Yeah, well, I think this gets to the heart of it.
Yep.
For to take a look at school in general, what is the purpose of school?
Right.
Is the purpose of school to institute values, beliefs, morality? I don't think so. Ultimately, I don't think so. I think that's ultimately the job of the family and the parents. And whenever you try to offload that on a big enough scale of school,
right.
So obviously public school is the largest scale of that. Charter and private schools get a little bit smaller and a little bit more contained. But on a large scale, let's take all of Texas, sweeping declaration. It has to be posted in there. Well, now you're right. Now it's posted, cool, but now you're at the mercy of whoever's leading that class to dictate what is the value behind this and what is the purpose behind this. Is it a good value, or is it just another example of how the Christian patriarchy is, imposing its beliefs on everyone? And so I'm more of a fan. If I had all or nothing, like in a public school setting, a government setting, I'm more of a fan of, no, do not imply morality and belief systems onto my kid, even if they're my own. I would much rather you focus on, okay, what is like the tangibles of learning, the math, English, stuff like that. And then my job as the parent is to educate them on what is life, what is our purpose here, what are we moving towards. Now, private schools get a little bit more of best of both worlds in that sense, where you're able to choose. Okay, let's say I'm a Christian, I'm able to say, okay, they're going somewhere for 8 hours a day. I want them to learn all of the math and English and stuff like that. But if at all possible, man, it'd be so great if they could also learn the morality, the ethics, and the purpose and the beliefs that we hold to as a family. And that's where I can say, okay, here's a Christian school. We align on beliefs, and okay, I'm going to send them there, and now we agree. Right. And that's where, charter schools apparently now, and private schools allow a little bit more nuance in that question, as opposed to public schools, at best on a state level, at worst on a federal level. Right. How do you federally mandate stuff like that, and control the actual execution of it? Right.
Well, luckily, I'd argue the Constitution does not give any the federal government any authority to dictate how it is that states choose to administer and have schools work. I mean, that's why it's all state based, and then more locally based, even with here in Texas independent school districts. So you can make a pretty good argument that it's laws that the federal government passes dealing with public education really, show me in the Constitution where you have that authority. It's not there. It doesn't exist.
And it gets the other problem of it. Let's say you have an overwhelmingly conservative Christian, the people in charge making these decisions, And let's say they put in the Bible in schools and prayer in schools and whatnot. Cool, great, fantastic. Let's fast forward 100 years and let's say it shifts the other way to like more like Islamic, Buddha, whatever. And now they start removing those things from the school and start adding in their stuff. Mm-hmm. Are we just going to have a double standard now, or is that's where it gets a little tricky for me on a public school level, on a governmental level, and I think it's just moving into giving. I think it's getting into putting responsibilities on the government that the government doesn't need those responsibilities. Right. I think if we were to move into like a more theological viewpoint on this, I think it's the job of the parents and the family to institute those things and build those things up.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, man, lots and lots of thoughts, and that's a complicated and really packed topic. And so, just for the record, I reserve the right to change any of my opinions on those things.
Well, and that's where I like, on the surface, I like the voucher system, but I'm going to hold that pretty loosely, knowing that I don't know next to anything. I know the elevator pitch of it, but I don't know how that actually works, and how would that work. Without getting too deep into it, this is where like big government becomes really hard, because like if we're trying to discuss how do we handle things in Azle, it's a little bit easier because now we're dealing with a tight knit community. Spread it out to Tarrant County, now you got millions of people. Spread out to Texas, now you got millions and millions of people. Spread out to the federal government, now you got over 300 million people that you're trying to create a single policy that just like spans it. And like I don't see a effective way to do that.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. Anyways, not to get too political.
Just a little bit. I mean, sometimes, there's issues like church and state issues that they cross paths sometimes. And it's interesting to talk about and think through. And, and it's what's also interesting is the entire concept of separation of church and state, where we get it, is Thomas Jefferson and his letters back and forth with the Danbury Baptist Association. So the Danbury Baptist Association was a group of churches that was very, very much for separation of church and state, because they didn't want the government in their business as Baptists, right? Which makes sense with how we're structured and organized and things like that. But it all goes back to that, right? Baptists, we have a long history of keeping the government out of our business and things like that as a church anyway. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I would say at the end of the day, no matter where your kid goes, if your kid goes public school, babysitting, private school, charter school, no matter where they go, at the end of the day, you're still responsible for raising that kid and cross-checking your kids go private school. Yep. And man, in a perfect world, we could send them to any school and just trust that it's done. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for your kids.
That's right.
And so even though they're going to a Christian school, you cross-check it.
Oh, yeah.
Man.
It's like Paul brought home a paper yesterday about on the Doctrine of the Trinity. And so I'm there, I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, that checks out.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, this goes even beyond education, even like your church.
Yep.
Man, we make mistakes, man. We
speak for yourself, Chris. Okay.
Yeah, right. If your kid goes to Sunday school, talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Right? We're not called to offload our parenting responsibilities to anyone.
Right.
We're called to partner with people, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, you're responsible for your kid. Yep. So you follow up on that no matter where they're going.
That's right.
Yep. All right. Fun.
Oh,
well, that is all we got for today. Did we ever hit the 10 comment mark whenever you said that you would sing?
You have to talk to Wendy. She asked about it this morning, and I said, I don't think we hit the 10 comments. And she goes, are you sure?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, we gave the challenge to y'all. If y'all would comment for Jacob to sing 10 times, then Jacob would sing. I think last I checked, we got up to 7.
Sounds like it might be a hair short.
Yeah, because I think we had 2 on Facebook, and then maybe 4 or 5 on
There's
YouTube.
5 on episode 10 on the YouTube.
Okay, and then
but
2.
The comment had to say something about me singing, though, right? Just to be clear.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So there's 5 comments on YouTube. I think there's 2 comments on Facebook. So we're 3 short. So I'm going to restructure this deal a little bit. We're going to carry those over.
Oh, God.
And so if we get 3 more comments on any video,
On any video, not even comments about him singing, just comments. Oh, God. Okay, so basically we're doing it next week.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. All right, bring your guitar.
All right, so tune in next week. If we get 3 comments, Jacob will sing for us. We'll find a song for him to do, and we'll all be mesmerized.
That's right. It'll be great.
Our lives will be changed. Never again the same.
American Idol, here I come.
All right, we're glad that y'all joined us here today. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, do all those things. Let's Facebook know that you enjoyed this and you want to see more of it. We will see y'all next week.